Hi there, Christine Weber here. Welcome to my weekly live stream. So I like to come live on Wednesdays, um, and usually share some yoga practices or yoga philosophy too. I'm going to talk a little bit about philosophy. And I appreciate you joining me. And please let me know topics that you'd like me to share with you. I'm happy to do that. I love supporting mature yoga teachers and getting their wisdom out into the world. That's sort of my thing. So if you want to study with me, I have a group called the Subtle Yoga Resilience Society where you can study with me live every week. Today, I want to talk about the crazy news cycle and the topic of faith, or what in yoga philosophy is called shraddha. Shraddha. The idea of faith has been abused, misused, manipulated, and basically forced on people for many, many centuries, millennium. And certainly it's something that has been used in a nefarious way, usually by politicians, to get their way, things that often have nothing to do with faith and belief. Also, I think Ken Wilber has some really interesting ways of looking at how folks apply things like faith. Ken Wilber, the modern day philosopher. For example, some people think about faith, or you could actually use like Lawrence Kohlberg's levels of moral development even works for this conversation. Like some people have faith, and that kind of faith is a very, what I would call tamasic faith. It's very blind. It doesn't involve any higher level reasoning, and it's like a follower kind of faith. It's not faith that's coming from a deep inner knowing. It's faith that comes from being told. It's faith that's related to fear, being told how to think. It's faith that comes often from a real dysfunctional attachment to caregivers, etc. That's the kind of faith that we're dealing with in a lot of ways right now. That's the kind of faith that causes wars, conflict between peoples, a lack of empathy. It's very interesting because people of faith often call themselves people of faith, often are people that have no tolerance for other faiths. And yet, what we know, what is science has proven, is the interconnectedness of all things. Unfortunately, we forget that interconnectedness. This is David Bohm, the great philosopher-physicist of the 1970s and 80s. David Bohm said, we get stuck in this crisis of perception and we fail to see our interconnectedness. And we think that the content of our thoughts is reality as it is. And that couldn't be anything further from the truth, So it's that kind of nefarious application of faith that causes so many problems. And yet, an elevated kind of faith, a faith that takes into account everyone is interconnected and we all are sharing in this spiritual life that we live as human beings. We're all connected spiritually. That kind of faith is what saves the world. So isn't it fascinating that both kinds of faiths can exist in human beings, Now, if we start with the worldview, let's talk about how we can help students as yoga teachers. How do we help our students get through challenging times like we're going through right now? And this very difficult news cycle. Every morning I wake up to something else that is really challenging, and I know people that are directly affected by some of these things that are going on right now, whether it's wildfires or the floods or politics. Like, people are directly affected and there's a lot of suffering, right? So as yoga teachers, we can help people to self-regulate, learn how to bring their nervous system under control, learn how to use their breath, learn how to use postures. But all of that's great. But what we can also do is help people understand how to leverage their faith, and their faith in a way that can become increasingly sattvic or refined. That kind of faith that's I think I said this, it's like a tamasic faith, that kind of blind faith that doesn't involve any of the higher faculties, right? So how do we get there? So the first thing we start is by talking about worldview. And if somebody's worldview doesn't include this interconnectedness, then it's actually outside of the realm of reality, scientific, materialistic reality, even. We are all interconnected. That's what the ecosystems are about. This body is an interconnected whole. It's not just a bunch of mechanical parts that are put together. Everything that we do affects other people. There's a tremendous amount of research in the social sciences, for example, that demonstrate that. So quantum physics demonstrates the interconnectedness of everything, even particles that are in different parts of the universe that can be connected. So the reality is that everything is interconnected, everything is interdependent. Our ecosystems are fragile because of that interconnectedness. Our borders are porous because of that interconnectedness. When we acknowledge that interconnectedness, the next logical step, what rationally follows out of that interconnectedness, is that there's an order that is not random. If there's randomness, you have good luck, you have bad luck, you don't know what's going to happen next. You get cynicism from randomness. There's nothing random. Nothing is random. Everybody knows that in some deep way. Because we go, I was just thinking about you when your friend called, or we see, we're thinking about something beautiful we saw one time, and then the image comes on the screen that reminds us of exactly that thing we were thinking about, or we see it out there in the world. Like, we all understand that there is something that's not random, that there's this interconnectedness, and the interconnectedness is not random. There's an order to it. There's a meaning and a purpose and an order to the universe. That just those two steps right there is enough for many people. You don't even have to go further to go, there's no reason to be cynical. I have to move forward because everything has a purpose and a meaning. And sometimes that's enough for people, but there is another step. And that next step is the order is beneficent. And that can be hard. There's a benevolent force in the universe. There's a loving force in the universe that cares for everyone. And it's difficult for us to see that force, particularly in tragedies and challenging times. That's when we default to everything's random, but it's not. There is a law of action and reaction, again, scientific. And so everything is ordered, and there's a beneficent order to it. If we can embrace that beneficence, then we can find that for many people, that's the faith that helps them to get through difficult times. I know that I don't understand why this thing happened, why this person left me, why this death occurred, why this destruction happened. I don't understand it, but I have faith. That's where faith is beautiful. That's where faith is beautiful and powerful. Doesn't mean we don't act. It doesn't mean we don't take stance against injustice. That doesn't mean any of that. It just means it gives us a center from which to make those positive actions and change things in the world. And then the fourth step, the fourth awareness, comes with the understanding that if there is a foundation of interconnectedness, if there's an order, and if there's a beneficence, then there is a goal. And this is what the yoga tradition says. The goal is oneness. The goal is, coming together, union, right? Understanding that interconnectedness. And it's really an evolutionary goal. It's an evolution of consciousness. So my mind starts to expand. I start to see that interconnectedness. I start to see the directionality, and I choose to participate in that evolutionary process. Teilhard de Chardin called it the co-evolution, right? I'm going to jump into those waters of evolution. I am going to go with the flow, and I'm going to swim along with it. I remember this movie I saw many years ago. It was the woman from the Gilmore Girls. I can't remember her name. This guy, I think his name is Jeff something. And he was kind of this grumpy guru, self-help kind of guy. And he had like amazing answers for everything, but he was just kind of a grumpy, miserable guy. And this one of his followers comes to him and says, just answer me this one question. is there free will? And he said, yes, of course there's free will. And you can either go in the direction of evolution or away from it. I mean, actually, Teilhard said that too. That's very common. You see that commonly. Like most of the philosophers will come to that conclusion. We do have free will. We do have choice, but the choice is: do I step into that flow or do I try and resist it? We see a lot of resisting going on right now politically in the world, and in people that are polarized from each other too. Whereas if we start to try and find our commonality, try and find empathy, try and feel that connection of all things, then we're fostering this. And even if it feels like I can't do that, I'm so angry, you come back to the recognition that that's what's happening. And your anger is part of it. Like that anger is a useful motivating force that gets you out there and doing things and making the changes that have to happen, right? So those are the 4 steps. And that it ends with this goal or this evolution of consciousness to realize itself, to expand and realize itself. And I think some of these deep teachings from the yoga tradition are even more valuable, even more important for people to learning how to self-regulate in difficult times than the breathing and all that other stuff we do. That stuff's great. But getting back behind it a little bit and understanding that you have this internal resilience that will get you through anything. And it's because you're deeply connected to the whole. And it's because you have chosen to step into that path of evolution. And that's why you're going to be okay. I hope this is helpful. I'd love to hear your comments. And I'll be blogging about this a little bit this week too. I'll see you next week. Take care.